flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J. Andy Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
I am Jaime Maussan, and you are listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
And now we are welcomed for the first time another member from the citizen hearing, retired Congresswoman Darlene Hooley. Mrs. Hooley, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's go back to 2 years ago, the citizen hearing. What was the process first to actually get you on there? Because from what I heard from the other members of the panel, should I say, it was quite a little circus once they heard, or once the public heard, that they were going to be a part of something regarding UFOs.
Well, it was interesting. When I talked about it to people, there were some that said, oh, that's great. And others said, why are you doing that? And I said, look, we have a very large universe out there. And if I can learn something new about this whole area, I'm going to do it.
One thing I really enjoyed was watching. I was recovering it all 5 days, and I literally saw the transformation of all 6 members, including you and everybody else on there, from coming in with open minds and essentially skeptical in the beginning, and as you heard testimony, literally transforming to realizing that there was so much more that wasn't being told. How did you feel during those 5 days, and how did your transformation come about?
Well, again, it was a subject, frankly, I didn't know very much about, and had, thought about it somewhat, but hadn't really spent any time on it. And when I was asked to do it, I spent a little time doing some research and reading a couple of books. But I was amazed at the people that testified and what they had seen and what they had heard and what they thought, and how articulate they were, how smart they were, and in many cases brave to go on a show that some people may make fun of. Oh, there's always someone in outer space. But the people that testified were so good, so bright, so convincing. I was really impressed by the information I gathered that week. Was how many airline pilots could also talk about this.
Now, what did you think about the fact that nuclear weapons were actually involved, or in the sense that these visitors, or whatever you want to call them, interacted with them, such as the 1967 incident in Montana, I believe it was, I forget the name of the Air Force Base, Malmstrom Air Force Base. What did you think about things like that?
Well, I had to believe what they had to say, because it was, first of all, again, credible people, and that they would go on TV or on radio and make up things that they hadn't seen. And again, I found those that testified so credible. And some of them, risked their reputation doing it, maybe risked their job doing this, but they knew what they had seen. They knew what they had experienced. And that message came across very loud and clear.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there were a lot of people that really have nothing to gain by talking about this. Well,
they
you're absolutely right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Dr. J, but a lot of these people have a lot more to lose than gain by talking.
Exactly. Exactly. And just by, for instance, if you're an airline pilot for 30, 40 years and then all of a sudden you talk about this, you may lose your job. And I'm so glad you brought that up. It's not that they had anything to gain, it's that they had so much to lose. I think that's what added to it, especially when you have retired colonels and you had international generals. Why would people really come up with such a story is what amazed me so much. Now, one of the current cases that really stuck out was the 1980 case in Rendlesham, which was Rendlesham Forest in the United Kingdom, which was a joint U.S. Air Force base / Royal Air Force base,
Right.
where there was apparent landing. Was there anything about that story that stuck out to you?
Again, it was the kind of story that you go, who would make this thing up? Why would you do that? And again, I have to talk about how credible all the people that testified were, and they were not some kook or not some, I mean, they had, like I say, they had jobs, they were in positions of authority, they came from every walk of life, and I don't think they were all lying about it. I mean, it happened to them, and they certainly conveyed that in part of the testimony.
Another thing I got to say to you is this is what I thought was so fascinating. If it wasn't for the citizen hearing and attention being given to John Burroughs and Jim Peniston, who were part of the Rendlesham case, where they were actually physically affected and the VA was hiding the records, if it wasn't for the letter that all of you on the committee signed, no action would have taken. And I want to inform you now that because of that, Senator McCain became involved and actually got some justice for John Burroughs. And there was a report by the UK issued, it was called the Condine Report, where it actually confirmed the landing. And that's what sort of started to get the benefits that he finally deserved from all these years of suffering. I mean, he had heart damage, so we got to say thank you on behalf of, because if it wasn't for panel members such as yourself or committee members, we would have never had justice for that. What did you think of the fact that you just heard that now, unless you've known about this before?
No, I had not known about it before. I'm pretty impressed that happened.
Now, while you were actually sitting in Congress, why do you think this issue never really came up? I mean, is there some agenda that's hiding it, or no one taking it seriously? Why did it take a mock congressional hearing to discuss this topic? Because
this is a topic that if you talk, if you walk down the street and said, do you think they're flying UFOs? If you are there, have they landed in this country? I mean, if you talk about it, there's still that huge amount of doubt. And frankly, people are skeptical, or they think you're a nut. And hopefully those sessions that we recorded and the people and their experiences and what they also, they're coming forward and testifying could have a negative effect on them. But I think it has, so much fun was made of this whole subject that I think it's hard for people to turn around and say, yeah, I think there's something to this.
In 1968, there was the only congressional hearing that I know on this subject, and at the citizen hearing on disclosure, there was Stanton Friedman, the only person that was still alive that testified at the real congressional hearing, that testified at this mock congressional hearing. And I thought that it was really fantastic that times have changed so much where people have so much more of an open mind. I mean, when I was going to school, and I'm sure when you were going to school, we were taught that the only solar system that existed was ours, that there was no such thing as planets outside of ours. Yet everybody who is in school now, any child that is, or anybody under 21 for this matter, was taught that, hey, there are planets found outside our solar system. And now we're finding these Goldilocks planets, so it's just becoming more of a reality.
Well, it's, like I say, it's a huge universe, and for us to believe that nothing else is happening except at this tiny spot called, our continent, there's more than that.
I absolutely agree. Exactly. And one major thing is there's a lot of talk.
This is a very small world that we're talking about here when you look at the whole system and the whole universe.
That's right. We're actually just a tiny speck of, if you count, isn't that what they say? If you take all the grains of sand in all the beaches of the world, that wouldn't even amount to the stars that we're able to count in our galaxy, let alone in the universe.
Right. And, we can only go so far in space. We haven't explored all of space. We've explored a few of the planets, a couple of them. But we don't have the equipment to really look way beyond area to see what's out there.
One thing, I don't know if you know much about this, is ancient aliens. A lot of people have been talking about and showing evidence and theories that we have been visited from thousands of years ago in the past, and every part of this world that literally would have had no way to communicate with each other has similar patterns, designs, and stories talking about beings from above or sky people giving them wisdom. And yet it sort of went dark throughout the years. But then what happened is that after we had our nuclear bomb detonate in 1945, they all of a sudden began to start to come again. And I thought, if you were someone outside looking in, wouldn't that be the most amazing and scary thing at the same time? Isn't that just a sad sight if you were just an observer?
Yeah, and again, I think it's something that, it's an area that we never talked about in school. At least I didn't. And I got a Bachelor of Science, so I had taken a whole bunch of science classes. It was nothing that most people had talked about, and there were a few incidences that happened here, and most people poo-pawed that and said you were crazy, and so it was sort of dropped. But I don't know that you ever get any questioning, even in a school, about that there's a possibility of people being in outer space, and they don't have to look like us. But I know this universe is way too big not to at least think there are others out there that may not look like us or act like us, but they have their own rituals, they have their own, they're going to live a different life because of the atmosphere is going to be different there.
I think you're absolutely right, and it'd be literally the height of human arrogance to believe that we're the only ones, especially now when we're able to look so far using the Kepler telescope versus the Hubble telescope. Just to believe,
right.
We used to believe that we're the only ones. Thousands of years ago, we were the center of the galaxy, or 500 years ago, the Earth was flat. 120 years ago, we knew for a fact you couldn't fly. And 60 years ago, it was a matter of fact we would never make it to the moon. Yet every one of these things is a possibility. So what used to be science fiction became science fact. And I think it's just a matter of understanding our physics. Do you believe that the physics that we know now can obviously be altered, or not altered, our understanding of them can be understood better so we could actually improve things such as space travel and everything else?
No, I guess I believe that things can always be made better. when I see how fast we are moving, and I will just, since I'm a lot older, I'll just use the time that I can remember when computers, had to be housed in a big warehouse,
Yes.
and how small they are, and that everybody is, with their phone, is in essence carrying around a small computer. Who would have ever thought that? I mean, and that our children are no longer write cursive. They learn to print, but they don't write cursive. Who would have thought that we'd ever do that? And those are really little, simple things. But we are sort of moving at the speed of light, and who knows what those changes are going to be, and who knows how far we can travel in space. And who knows when we're going to encounter people from other planets. I don't know those things, but I do know that our science and our intelligence here and what we can do has gone the speed of light. I mean, it's phenomenal to me.
And this is the technology that we have available as civilians. I couldn't even imagine what they're using in the Pentagon's research and development laboratories, or the higher echelon military such as Delta Force or Navy SEALs. I mean, from what I hear, they're a decade or two in advance of what we're using now as iPhones.
Yeah, I mean, but look at how fast. Look at how fast the whole technology took a hold and people are now using. I can remember I was in the Oregon legislature and someone said, we're building an informational highway. And I'm going, how do you build an informational highway? I mean, it was beyond, I couldn't imagine it.
Was that the internet they were referring to?
Well, yeah, it was informational highway. I mean, everything had, when I was growing up or when I was in college, as an adult, not that many years ago, I dealt a lot with cable TV. And you had to hook everything up, had to be hooked to a post, had to be hooked to your TV. I mean, that's all changed. That's all changed. And it changed. And I think our world is changing that fast. And people now only communicate, rarely in person. They communicate by email and Facebook and all of the other things that are available to us on the internet. And look at how quickly that has advanced. So,
you're absolutely right. Some people mention Facebook being one of the, if it was a country, it would be either the largest or the third largest because of the amount of users on it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm old enough to think that, I mean, I cannot imagine when you go from a computer that has to be housed in a huge building to now, and very few people had access to it, to now in, like 30 years, 40 years, we all have a computer in our hand.
Exactly. That's how much times have changed.
Yeah. And when I can remember, this was several years ago, I went to substitute for a class at the high school, and it was math, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, I'm good. I can explain this. I know how to do this. And as I was explaining and writing some things on the chalkboard, which they don't use anymore either, but when I was writing something on the chalkboard, they said, Mrs. Hooling, it would just be best if you not do that because it confuses us. And I know we get to the same answer. We just do it differently. And I'm going, oh, okay.
and I looked quickly and I found a couple of people that were straight A students in that class, and I said, if you have a question, ask those two. Because the things that we came to the same conclusion, but that's how different it is in this world, coming down to the fact of just how you get to the same solution, but you get there a totally different way that's more understandable, and that is not just rote memorization. And I just look at what is happening, and when kids no longer had to write in cursive, I'm going, well, who's going to interpret all these old letters? Well, those old letters are all going to disintegrate, and the only thing they have and the only way they'll know how to communicate is, in fact, by a computer or a phone or some device.
Now, let me switch gears. Let's talk about politics for a bit. First, before we go into current politics, let me ask you, how did you get involved, and what was the process for you to eventually get up to being a member of the House of Representatives?
It started with my son, who fell off the swing at the playground equipment and hit his head on cement. And I took him to the doctor. He was fine. And I started looking around. I thought, we have cement under all this playground equipment. So that's how it all started. And as I worked on that and fought for that and eventually got rid of the cement under the playground equipment, then then all of a sudden somebody came and asked me if I would run for the state legislature. And I said, I don't know anything about it. And they said, but you were brilliant getting done what you wanted to get done. And I said, I just spent a whole lot of time and energy getting that little tiny thing taken care of. And so I ended up on the state legislature. Then I ended up, they had never had a woman as a county commissioner in our county. So when one of the men left, they asked if I would be the next county commissioner, and so I did that. And then I was very happy there, and then I got a call from our vice president and said, will you run for Congress? And made me feel guilty if I said no. So I said, okay.
Which vice president, do you mind if I ask?
No, Al Gore.
Wow. So you got an actual phone call from Al Gore, and he asked you to run for the House of Representatives as opposed to just being in the Oregon legislature.
Yeah. In fact, when the call came in, we were in a board meeting, and our receptionist came in to see us, and she said, we have a phone call. I said, well, we're in a board meeting. I'll call him back. And she said, no, it's the vice president. I said, well, tell him I'll call him back. I mean, I'm thinking vice president of some company.
Yeah.
She said, no, it's the vice president. I go, oh, well, maybe I should take that phone call. So I did. And it was very hard to say no to. So I decided to run, and I'm glad I did. And it was a wonderful 12 years, and I said, it's time to come home. So I did.
Now, let me ask you, it's 2015. Obviously, elections are a little over a year away. We're getting ready for the primaries. We have all these candidates. Some of them are, really out there getting a lot of remarks, should I say, is a nice word, should I say, like Trump. I mean, a lot of people have hatred for him, and on the other hand, he's got high numbers. So what is your opinion on these candidates?
Well, right now the field is so wide open, and there's no one that has run before that I'm aware of. There's maybe I'm just missing that person, but there are so many candidates, and it's such an open field. I think that every single one of them running thinks they can win, and I don't know what kind of surprises we're going to have. certainly with the first debate, we had some surprises. But it will winnow itself down as time goes along, and it'll be what, if they can talk about things that, and believe in things that the American public will empathize with them. But, it's a combination of timing, having the right message, being in the right place at the right time, finding a way to get a little edge over the rest of the candidates. I don't think anyone has the edge, particularly.
You're right, especially at this point, considering how many candidates there are. There are two that really stick out aside from Trump in my mind, and that's because of their previous history. A lot of people complained about the Bush years, right? So we had Bush Sr., and we had George W. Bush, but now we have Jeb Bush running. If people were complaining about the Bush years, wouldn't it just sort of be a repeat of having Jeb Bush there again? I mean, at least that's my opinion for the people who were complaining.
Well, I thought a lot of people, I think their family didn't ever expect George Bush to run, that they expected Jeb to run. And, I don't know him. I don't not work with him. He obviously has been effective in Florida, and, well, at least he's gotten elected there a couple times. And he has a really good last name for a president. That's what
That's right. And the other person I was saying is obviously we are in dire need of having a woman president. But Hillary Clinton, people, the same thing. They complained about the Clinton years, at least that group. We have one group complaining about one, the other group complaining about the other. Right. If people were complaining about the Clinton years, because she was very active, if I'm not mistaken, during Bill's presidency, wouldn't it sort of be essentially a repeat in that sense because he'd be helping her?
Yes, I assume he would be helping her. She certainly helped him when he was running, and I hope he's helping her. It is, when you've got 14 or 50, however many candidates are running right now, a lot of them, there are so many people that don't know very few. Donald Trump they've probably heard of, Jeb Bush they've heard of. There are not many people in running that the majority of people even would have a clue who they were. So with Clinton, she's a very strong candidate. And I think that people have, other than Bernie Sanders, and there'll probably be a couple others that join in, have backed away from her, from running because of her popularity and because a lot of people think she would be great.
Let me ask you a couple more questions. For people out there young enough to have a life to go anywhere and are thinking about a life in politics, what would you say to anyone out there who wants to become a congressperson or a run for presidency? What advice would you give to anyone?
If you can be from any walk of life. If you have a desire to really make a difference in this world, whatever that difference is, whether it's, making sure that people are taken care of in their elder years, whether it is making sure that kids have the opportunity of a great education, whatever your issue is, has to resonate with the public. And, I started out as trying to change get rid of the cement and the playground equipment.